Welcome to the Creative Content Club podcast with me, Naomi Rose. If you are a business owner who wants to consistently create content that connects and converts into clients, this is the podcast for you. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Let's get right into it. Hello and welcome to this very first episode of the Creative Content Club podcast. You have absolutely no idea how excited I am to be back again behind the mic. So this actually isn't my first podcast. This is my second one. In fact, my first one was all about behind the scenes of the baking business world. And I was telling people exactly what really happened in the kitchen. So that was really quite a different podcast from this one, and I absolutely loved it. But when I decided to change this current business slightly, pivot and be more focused on content and content marketing, the podcast had to really go. So I thought now is a perfect opportunity to launch this new podcast because it's been about a year since I wrapped the last one. I really wanted to share a podcast that would be useful. For those of you that are tuning in that already know who I am, you know I'm quite straight for talking. You know that if you've been on any of my workshops or masterclasses, they are pretty fast paced. I do not hold back. I usually pack stuff in. I am known for going over the time limit slightly because I want you to get as much value from working with me or being on a session with me as possible. And I was thinking about what I should do for this very first episode. As much as I try and avoid doing stuff like fluffy things or waffling, although I do waffle, and you'll probably gather that from these podcasts, there is only one thing I can really do on this very first episode to introduce it, if you like, and that is to just tell you about my journey into what I'm doing now. I'm here to tell you a little bit about who I am, why content creation, because I know so many of you really do not like doing it. In fact, you feel like it's a slog. You do not enjoy it. I, on the other hand, am the opposite. Content is my go-to. I absolutely love the planning. I love the creativity of it. In my world, marketing has no rules. You can get away with everything in the name of getting visible. It's absolutely amazing. And that's why I like doing what I do, because there are no limits to the creativity you can have. But I also am a fan of a spreadsheet. I love structure. Give me some data, give me Google Analytics, and I'll be lost in there for hours. So this is like the perfect business to have. So without starting from birth, because that would bore you all to tears and no one would then ever listen to this podcast ever again, I'm going to tell you how I got into where I am now, how I approach content creation, because it's probably a bit different from a lot of other people. And so many people say that I have a very different approach to things. So my background really is in music. I am a musician. I have been a musician since I can remember. I play multiple instruments. I'm mainly a cellist these days because I just do not have the time to do any more than what I do. I play in 3 orchestras. It keeps me fairly busy, and they're fairly demanding when you're in concert mode. Some of the orchestras I play with actually have very little rehearsal time, so you're literally in there having to play the piece and do the concert. So it's very, very fast paced. But I love the creativity that music gave me. It was something I could connect with as a child. I just understood it. That was where the love of being creative, but there was also this kind of structure that music has, particularly when you're growing up in the classical music world and that's your aim to sort of go into that professionally, is very, very structured. It's very strict. It's very regimented. What I love about music is the fact that, take an orchestral concert, for instance, whether you're ready or not, you're performing in that concert. That concert is happening. You've got people buying the tickets. You've got a structure to it. You have a formula to it. And it's being able to use that creativity within that structure. And I think that's where my love of content has also come from. When I went to university, I did music performance and I really, really loved that. I actually went to a music college that gave me freedom to be the creative I wanted to be. I moved away from that really strict classical world because I don't follow rules very easily. I'm that kind of person that challenges stuff. And I didn't want to necessarily go into a place that said you had to play in a certain way and do a certain thing in a certain way, when I was like, but that doesn't just seem creative for me. I want to have the freedom to do music in the way that I interpret it and push the boundaries and do all those different things. So that's what I did. As I went through university and I came out the other end thinking, where am I going to go now? Because I decided I didn't really want to do performing professionally. I decided to go into the organisation side, the events planning, the marketing side of it. And I went and did my master's in arts management, which taught me an awful lot about really the basics of what I know now. Because particularly in the arts, and I could spend a whole day talking to you about and debating what is art and all of that kind of thing. I'm not going to do that because I'm going to bore you to tears. In the world of the arts, there is this very, very big misconception, still happens now, that you can have passion, you can have profit, but you can't have both. And I just didn't believe that, because when you looked, and growing up in the world of orchestras, and trust me, this is still like this now, the people that are managing and running the orchestras or any other arts places are often naturally creatives. They don't have the same business discipline that you need, and they're two different skill sets. And absolutely they are. My brain works in both of those ways. So I love the event organising and the planning and the management and looking at how you can make things work and how do you get from one problem to another, solving all of those problems. But I love the creativity side. I love working with creatives. So those two worlds really collided for me. So I could take that creative side of what I did and go into a career that involved me to be able to have spreadsheets and I don't know, all of these different organisational tools that I absolutely loved. So that's what I did. I went and worked in a theatre, in a music venue, in festivals, outdoor events. I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to work in most departments. So I was able to work anywhere. Generally speaking, when you work in some form of arts venue, if there's a job to do, you get it done, no matter if it's your role or not. The show has to go on. So if you need to go and do a job, like for instance, I used to sometimes go and do the dressing behind the scenes for some of the big shows because they needed extra dressers. So that literally meant dressing people. It's really not as glamorous as it sounded. In fact, it can be actually quite disgusting given how hot, sweaty some of the people get. I'm not going to talk about that right now. It gave me that kind of opportunity to see all areas of how a theatre venue, a festival, all of those sorts of things worked. And I loved it. And I ended up getting into marketing because, again, marketing saw everything. Marketing was your number one department for anything, whether that's communications, for promotion, for crisis management. Trust me, I've done quite a few crises in my time, but everything went through marketing comms. And from there, that's where my career in sort of social media and digital really began. Because I was the only one in the company, in the business at that point that really understood the world of digital, and I had a passion for it. I really loved online, all of that kind of thing. And social media was just on the rise then, not in the business world necessarily. I mean, pages didn't exist in Facebook when I first started saying we need to be here, we need to be in this space, because marketing is going to change. Social media is going to change the way we market. We're going to go from broadcast to a communications, which is different, where people can quite easily have an opinion very publicly, not in the same way they used to, very quickly. It's going to change what we do. I was kind of responsible for setting up all of the channels and getting them sort of aligned. But then I also took on everything to do with digital, including the websites. And I used to deal with a system called Front Page, which was Microsoft's version of HTML. It was horrendous, but that was the way I worked. And then I was given the email list. I ended up kind of doing digital marketing naturally. And from that, everything I did was got that kind of creative side, but it also had that planning side because I had to map in everything to make sure that things went out at the right time, and I could make sure that all the marketing was layered so that you got this layered visibility strategy with everything I did. So that's where I kind of began. And working in the world of the arts, having that sheer volume of shows with very diverse audiences and very different contracts, if you like, of what was required from us as a venue, meant that I had to really look at every show that I was responsible for promoting, because I couldn't do it all on my own. There was a small team of us. But every show had to really get to understand the different types of audience, who the people were that were going to walk through that door. And if we weren't, well, as they said, getting bums on seats, why was that? What can we do to improve that? Particularly around classical music. We often say, like in classical concerts, it's a dying trade. The audience is getting older. There is less young people coming through. That is the preconception and the misconception that we often hear about in that world. A lot of everything I did through that master's degree was looking at how you can break down those barriers to people walking through the door. Because if you're not in the world of classical music and you've never been to a concert before, it can be really off-putting to go into a dark auditorium where you might feel out of place, you might feel frowned upon because it's been seen as a very highbrow type of thing. You might not know where to clap. It's all of those little details that stop people from walking through their door, even though they could have a really great experience. That knowledge and that skills and being able to see all of these different acts and shows and productions come through the door that had tickets to be sold meant that I had to look at content marketing and digital marketing in quite a different way from most people. The other thing about working in the arts is you have small budgets. You don't have massive budgets that you can whack on advertising. If we did, life would be easy. Actually, we had to do really creative stuff. We had to think outside the box to be able to get that visibility with not very much money sometimes. And that was a real art to doing it. In fact, even when I'm being given bigger budgets in my career, I'm like, I don't know if I just need all of this because I can do it on a much smaller budget. You tend to learn what you need to do. So that's where it went. And from there, my career then developed into working in mostly nonprofit and charity, but the roles I took were mostly around project management, campaigning, or even starting up the social media teams in the companies. And then it kind of developed from there. So often I was, and the big places that I worked for, you're talking about 2,000 people. So there was never just one social media channel. There were multiple. I'm talking around 50 odd across the entire business. Different channels had different purposes, but it all came under sort of my responsibility and keeping that big picture, because ultimately when I was doing that job and then I went up to sort of heading up the entire digital team, I had to know exactly really what the business goals and values were, where the business was going, where the vision was, and make sure that was communicated super clearly down into all of those people that had some public facing digital channel, whether that be social media, whether that be email, whether that be the websites. And the websites I was sort of responsible for were very big. They are huge. You're talking thousands and thousands of pages wide. Everything that the business did had a touch point in digital, and being able to have that kind of autonomy. And in some ways I was very lucky because certainly when I was working for those companies and organizations, I had quite a lot of freedom to be able to do stuff. So there wasn't like red tape and sign off processes in the same way there probably are now, because it was all still quite new. This was a world that businesses and companies were learning about, and they weren't really sure how it was going to work. But whether it was people on the outside world watching what I was doing or what the business was saying across social media, on the emails, on the website, whether that was people internally, whether that was board members, they all watched. Everyone could see exactly what myself and my teams were doing in the public eye to represent the organisations and businesses I work for. So the pressure was actually often quite big on mine and my team's shoulders, but I was so fortunate to work with some really good teams, people that were creative, people that actually could think outside the box and come up with ideas to get that visibility, that managed to build that brand awareness, really connect with the audiences that they wanted to connect with, really talk to the right people in the right context, because sometimes it wasn't just appealing to the sort of the customer base. It was sometimes appealing to others in government. It could be appealing to thought leaders. It could be appealing to industry experts. all very different types of audiences that needed different communications in different methods, in different ways, that ultimately said the same thing and related back to those business goals. And that often could be quite challenging, bearing in mind that this was also during the time that Twitter used to only have 140 characters. And a lot of my time was spent in the world of Twitter doing stuff there because it was often the most reactive. So that taught me a huge amount about really being able to connect with audiences in the right way, in the right places, gain those skills and knowledge that would help get more visibility for the places that I work. My journey into business actually really started about 7 years ago now. And actually, I quit my 9 to 5. I actually decided that a year before I left my final company that I worked for, I decided I didn't want to work for it anymore. I knew I didn't want to work for it. I knew I wanted to work for myself, but I stayed on an extra year to carry on leading the digital team. But I basically said, right, I am only doing this for a year. I'm not coming back. This is my letter of resignation. So when I leave, I'm walking out that door. And the person that comes back into this role has this job back when I come back. And there is no role for me to come back to. I wrote my job out deliberately, much to the shock of my team that were like, why on earth would you do that? Aren't you like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know yet, but I don't want to work for anyone else. And that's when I found the cafe and bar. Well, actually, it wasn't a cafe and bar then. It was an empty space. In fact, it was an old nightclub. I had a vision in a really cheesy way. I walked into it and I knew that building had so much potential to be a fabulous place for people to meet, drink coffee, come for a dog walk, enjoy live music, and just really feel like they're welcomed into a space. And it kind of snowballed a little bit from there. And before you know it, by the end of 2018, I had opened the doors to a cafe and bar, which I thought would be quite a small business. Turned out it wasn't. It ended up with 17 staff after about, I think it was less than 6 months. I can't remember when. Either way, it was much bigger than I thought it would be. And it was a fabulous journey. It taught me an awful lot about people. Being able to actually physically see your customers in your cafe and bar and really understand their behaviours and their buying habits. It was fascinating. Not that I watched them in a creepy way, but it taught me so much about how to really connect with people on social media as well in person, how to really develop those skills that would help me get more visibility for my business, because I did some of the marketing myself. I also did every other job like many of you business owners out there. I was lucky enough to have a fabulous team of people that could do stuff, but I was the only one that really understood how to get visibility because that was my job. And I worked with the consultancy as well because I just did not have the capacity. Being able to connect with my customers in the cafe and bar is really what led me to crowdfunding the bakery, because I could understand what their needs, wants and desires were. And beyond actually just wanting to come in for a cup of coffee and cake, actually really what they were always coming in for was for connection, for friendliness, for the experience, and the fact that they could then support a local business run by a family. That was up their street. They really wanted to do that. They really wanted to see that happen because they wanted to feel part of that community and belonging and making something happen. That's exactly what they did. Being able to develop a marketing campaign that really targeted them. And I didn't have a huge audience. Like, my email list wasn't big. My social medias were okay, but it wasn't what was going to get people to actually then support that crowdfunding. So I had to use influencers. I had to use people that had more visibility, more clout in my local town that could really help me reach the audiences that I needed to get to that I thought would support it. And they did. And they came through. And it was such an amazing learning curve and experience. After I opened the cafe, I went then on to enter the team into Britain's Best Loaf Awards without them knowing. They didn't actually know when I did it. But I thought, let's just go and have a nice jolly. We'll meet some other artisan bakers and we'll learn some things about how good our bread is. And we ended up winning. And it was such a privilege to be able to win an award like that so short time-wise after opening. It was only 3 months. the amount of work that had gone into opening that bakery from not only myself, from the team, from the people that actually crowdfunded the bakery, and being able to give that back to them and enabling them to be part of that, that was really special. That was really something incredible. And it taught me, again, a huge amount about how to really connect and reach audiences, create that kind of content that converts and builds that customer and client experience that they really, really want. So I closed the cafe, bar and bakery back in 2023 now. And it's led me to where I am today, which is helping people create content that converts into clients. Because all of this experience of running my own business and being able to take the knowledge that I've learned for the last 20 odd years, plus my creativity, this is what I can really help people with. Because there is no business the same as any other business. And marketing is the same. Yes, you can use some of the same processes, some of the same templates. Marketing has to be tailored to you and your ideal clients and the experience you're going to give them. And that's where my skill set comes in, because I love doing that. I love getting to know businesses and what they're doing and helping people to really plan out that content that connects with their ideal clients. Tell those stories that you all have hidden in there in a way that really builds that know, like and trust factor, because people buy from people that we like, know, like and trust. We buy things that resonate with us and appeal to our emotional needs. That is really everything I've learned over the last few years. And it's why I wanted to do this podcast, because one, I love a little chat, but also because there is a lot of knowledge to share and there's a lot of misconception about how to do all of this content planning stuff. And people feel it's laborious, they procrastinate brand, and then nothing gets done. So I am here to make that easier for you, to even make it fun, if you will. I will put that out for you and create stuff that works for you and your clients. It doesn't have to be difficult. It really doesn't. But if you don't know what you don't know, then how are you going to move forward? And that's what I do know. I hope you enjoy the future episodes of the Creative Content Club podcast. They are going to be weekly. I'm going to be sharing with you some great insights, some top tips and things that I think that might help you each week. But if you know me already, you know I'm always open to hearing what suggestions you have. So please do reach out and let me know a bit about what you would love to hear on this podcast or any ideas you have. And I will definitely give it a think to see whether I can include it in future episodes and whether other people might find it useful. Likelihood is if you've got the question, so is other people. Okay, I'm going to wrap it there for today because I've waffled on about who I am and what I do for long enough now. But I hope to see you on let's say the second episode, the second official episode, the first one that's really going to get into the nitty-gritty of creating content consistently that converts into clients and sales. Thank you for listening to the Creative Content Club podcast with me, Naomi Rose. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this podcast a review. If this episode gave you clarity or sparked a new idea, I'd really appreciate it if you could share it with someone else who would find it useful. If you haven't already, give me a follow on Instagram and come and connect with me on LinkedIn. And finally, don't forget to check out the show notes to take my quiz to find out exactly why your content isn't converting into clients. Thanks again for listening, and I'll be back again next week with another episode.